The New York Rangers decided to fire head coach Peter Laviolette after a very disappointing 2024-2025 season for the New York Rangers. And with that being said, the previous two head coaches that were hired by this team being Peter Laviolette and Gerard Gallant, both of those guys were more kind of veteran, very experienced NHL head coaches who previously had a lot of experience at being NHL head coaches. And I think the next coach that does get hired by this team that is going to be the head coach they're leading this organization, I think needs to be more of a maybe kind of younger coach, or not necessarily even a young kind of guy, but at least a first-time NHL head coach here with maybe a different kind of mindset there, I think is probably kind of what's best for this team going forward. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at a bunch of head coaching candidates that are mostly going to be guys who could potentially be looking for their first NHL head coaching job. Now, some of these guys have obviously been assistants at the NHL level, but most of these guys are going to be first-time potential NHL head coaches. And then at the end, we'll take a look at a couple more experienced guys who have previously had an NHL head coaching job. But starting off here, we're going to take a look at Jay Leech, who is, definitely a guy who's been talked a lot amongst Rangers fans about possibly being that next head coach of the Rangers. He is a New York native, was born in Syracuse. He's only 45 years old, turning 46 in September. So, still fairly young for a potential NHL head coach there. Back in the late 90s to 2001, he ended up playing 4 seasons with Providence College at the college level, then ended up taking a step up to pro hockey where he had, quite a few games played, played across the ECHL and the AHL, playing some pro hockey, also ended up playing over his pro career 70 total games in the NHL, having 3 points there as a 6'4" left-handed defenseman. But then in 2015-2016, ended up making the step up to be a coach at the pro level where he was an assistant with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. Then ended up taking the step up to be an AHL head coach full-time there in 2017-2018 for 4 seasons consecutively until 2021, where he was the head coach of the Providence Bruins. Then in 2021-2022, he decided to take that step up to be the Seattle Kraken NHL assistant coach there, one of them, for 3 seasons there up until this season, 2024-2025, where he left the Kraken to join the Boston Bruins and will now more than likely have the opportunity to interview for a few NHL head coaching jobs and could potentially be a head coach in the NHL next season. Next up here, though, we have another kind of young guy here who doesn't have experience at the NHL level of being a head coach, and that is Jeff Halpern. This is someone who is definitely one of, if not my favorite candidates to be the next head coach of the New York Rangers. He's still only 48 years old, born in Washington, D.C. He was a former center, but this is someone who has spent the last 7 seasons in the NHL being an assistant coach for arguably the best NHL head coach right now in the entire league in Jon Cooper, the head coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Jeff has been with that team since 2018-2019 up until this season now, where he's been an NHL assistant coach for Jon Cooper. And then even the 2 seasons before that, back in 2016-17 and 17-18, he was an assistant coach with the Syracuse Crunch, still in that Tampa Bay organization. So this is someone who has been a part of, 2 really good, organizations there. Obviously, it's one whole organization, but, the Syracuse Crunch as a team has obviously been a very good AHL team for the most part there, especially, back in 16-17, those kind of years. They were definitely, for the most part, quite good. All these took that step up there to be with the Tampa Bay Lightning, where they, from 2018-2019 up until now have been, one of the better, obviously, teams in the entire NHL, winning a couple of cups over that time. So this is someone who has learned from one, if not the best NHL head coaches right now in Jon Cooper. I spent 7 years with him as an assistant, and I think that experience, under a guy like Cooper could be pretty incredible. And you also take a look at back in 95-96 to 98-99, he spent 4 seasons there playing for the University of Princeton. So got to be a pretty smart guy that you'd have to imagine. And he also did have a total of 976 games played at the NHL level, tallying up 373 total points, playing for a bunch of different teams, but also spent 30 games with the Rangers, had 1 point there back in 2012-2013, his second last season in pro hockey. So all these, he's the guy who has a lot of experience playing at the pro level, also played a few seasons over in Europe as well, playing a bit in Finland and Switzerland, had, one little stint down there for 6 games in the AHL, 4 years at the college level there, University of Princeton, also played a bit in some junior hockey. So this is a guy who's played all over the place there and obviously has a lot of experience at the pro level playing and also being a coach. Next up here, we have a coach from the University of Denver, and that is David Carl, who is definitely, I would say, by far the most kind of hyped up coach in quite some time. He is still only 35 years old, turning 36 in November, so very young for a coach, and for a guy who is that young, to have that much experience at the college level of being a head coach is pretty impressive. Since 2018, 2019 now, he has been the head coach of the University of Denver, and before that was a graduate assistant coach with the school from 2008 to 2012, and then from 2014 till 2018 was a official assistant coach. So this is someone who's been obviously around the hockey world coaching for a very, very long time. Even before that, had 2 years back in 2012 to 2014 of being the USHL assistant coach of the Green Bay Gamblers. So was a coach in the USHL. The NCAA has always been the head coach for the last two gold medal winning teams for Team USA at the U20 World Juniors. So he's a very accomplished coach there. Has won a national championship, has 2 gold medals with Team USA at the U20 squad. He's done a very good job in his head coaching career and coaching career in general. And for a guy this young to have this much experience, it's definitely pretty crazy. There is a reason for that, though, and it is a little unfortunate as he did have some pretty serious injuries, which kind of held him back from potentially having a nice long pro hockey career. He was a former 7th round pick back in 2008 of the Tampa Bay Lightning. His brother, Matt Carl, many of you may have heard of him. He was a very good NHL defenseman for many, many years. He had a nice long pro career. Unfortunately, David could not, but David has turned out to be a phenomenal head coach. So maybe he could be the next guy for the Rangers, although I'm not quite sure he's going to leave the University of Denver quite yet, but it definitely is possible. And if he does join the Rangers, I would be very, very happy if he was the next head coach of this team. Next up here, we've got Todd Nelson, who is a former 4th round pick of the Pittsburgh Penguins back in the 1989 draft. He only ended up playing a total of 3 games in the NHL over his playing career, but also spent quite a bit of time in many, many seasons in the IHL and the AHL in the 90s into the 2000s, where he also ended up spending a couple of seasons over in Europe playing in Germany as well as Finland. He then began his coaching career as a player assistant, where he also played in his final year of pro hockey in the UHL with the Muskegon Fury, was also a player assistant, then ended up taking on a full-time coaching role in 2002-2003, so the year after he finally retired from pro hockey, as an assistant coach with the Grand Rapids Griffins in the AHL, then spent 2 years after that winning back-to-back UHL championships as the head coach of that team, the Muskegon Fury. Spent 3 seasons there in a row, but won back-to-back championships there. The 3rd year lost in round 2, then took a step up to the AHL as an assistant once again, then up to the NHL with the Thrashers as an assistant for back-to-back seasons, then spent 5 years as an AHL head coach with the Oklahoma City Barons. Then in 2014-15, I believe it was after Dallas Eakin got fired as the head coach of the Oilers mid-season there, Todd Nelson ended up coaching the team for 46 games or to finish up the season there, where they obviously did not make playoffs. But then after that season there in 2015-16, he took over the head coaching job of the AHL Grand Rapids Griffins, where in his first season was a second-round exit, but then his second season there with the team won the AHL championship. Then spent 4 years as an assistant coach of the Dallas Stars from 2018 to 2022, and then for the past 3 seasons up until this season has been the head coach of the Hershey Bears, the AHL team, of course, of the Washington Capitals, and he has won back-to-back championships, back-to-back Calder Cups in 2022-23 and 23-24. And for this season, once again, they of course made playoffs and are right now waiting in the Atlantic Division semifinals to see who they will ultimately end up facing. So clearly, he is a very good coach at the pro level, has had a lot of experience. He's won 2 UHL championships as a head coach. He's won 3 AHL championships, including a potential one this season there. He's also made round 3 2 other times as well with the Oklahoma City Barons. So this is someone with a lot of experience, a lot of, achievements and success. So if he were the next head coach of this Rangers team, I would not be against. And he's also not a guy with, 5 years of being an NHL head coach. He was a head coach in the NHL for just half a season thereafter. Dallas Eakin got fired mid-season. So it's not like he's been a kind of full-on head coach for an entire season yet. He doesn't have a lot of experience at that. So that's kind of why I'm still more than willing to see a guy like this hired. And really and truly, it might not be a bad ad for this team at all with all the success that he has had at the pro level. Next up here, we've got a pretty experienced head coach, and that is Rick Tocchet. Now, like I said, I do want to see this team go for more of a potential kind of younger guy who has less experience as an NHL head coach, but if they do go for an experienced kind of guy, Rick Tocchet might not be the worst option available. There aren't a ton of phenomenal candidates who have a bunch of experience, so I really do think going after a less experienced guy who hasn't quite been the NHL coach yet is probably what's best for this team. But there are some other guys out there like Bruce Boudreau, who I'm not too interested in, Dan Bilesma, Jay Woodcroft, who those could be okay candidates, but if I had to go for an experienced guy, I would probably pick Rick Tocchet. I know some fans aren't going to love that, but I think Rick is a solid coach there. Not a great one, but definitely not a terrible one. And of course, Rick Tocchet has spent the last 3 seasons as the head coach of the Vancouver Canucks, where he helped them, I would say, overachieve and make the second round of last season. Obviously, this season didn't go quite as planned, but I still think could be a potential decent head coach. He also spent 4 years back in 2017 to 2021 as the Arizona coach, and also spent 2 years as the Tampa Bay Lightning head coach back in 2008 to 2010. So this is obviously a guy who has some experience at the NHL level of being a head coach for some not great teams, honestly, and that's kind of where I don't put all of that blame on him. I mean, you take a look at those Arizona teams, for example, from 2017 to 2021, they were definitely not a great team, so I don't know how much you can truly blame, a guy like Rick Tocchet. They're obviously not making the playoffs in 3 of the 4 seasons there, and being a first-round exit in the 1 year you make it out of those 4 seasons with the Coyotes isn't great, but still, I wouldn't put a ton of blame on him there. And of course, Vancouver, like I said, he took over back in 2022, 2023. They weren't a great team then. He obviously didn't make the playoffs that season. And then, though, in 2023, 2024, they make the playoffs. They're looking like a very good team, make the second round there, and I do think kind of overachieved. So in my opinion, Rick Tocchet is a pretty solid coach there, and if he was that coach of the Rangers, I wouldn't hate it, but I also would love it, as I do think this team should go after more of a younger guy, in my opinion. Anyways, that's going to do it for today's video. If you have enjoyed, definitely don't forget to click that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content. And also, definitely don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on the New York Rangers potentially hiring a very experienced head coach. Would you rather see him go after a less experienced head coach? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'll catch you next one, and let's go Rangers.